I believe it's important because I believe that all humans should have rights because they are humans. That includes humans with disabilities. That's what we're fighting for within our business. That's what we are hoping these videos are part of. That's the coaching and the workshops that we're doing. That's all part of that work.
Welcome to Chez, the place of new beginnings. My name is Catherine Hubert, and I founded and own a French-inspired cafe where, as a team, we are on a mission to change the way that our world understands neurodiversity and employs humans with disabilities. Our restaurant was born and is based in Greensboro, North Carolina, and that's where we practice and teach our mission and model. This is our channel where we dive in deep to who we are, what we do, and why we do it. Our hope is that this content is empowering to disabled and non-disabled humans alike, and that no matter what perspective you are coming from, employer, employee, parent, friend, or Chez fan, you feel welcomed, you learn something new, and you walk away with a deeper appreciation and understanding of humanity.
Hey everybody, welcome back. We are diving today into what is ableism, which is not necessarily a light topic, but I am going to go over just some baseline, postures or reminders as I'm getting ready to dive into this content for you to keep in mind, for me to keep in mind, so that we're on the same page, hopefully, as we're going in, and that we can learn and grow together. So the first thing is, this is not a shaming session. We are replacing shame with curiosity. So I want to state that from the beginning. This is not me sitting here talking at you and describing ways that you need to be better or that you need to change or that you need to do things differently. This is simply opening up a conversation about a word and a term that is used in our culture, in our world today, and that can oftentimes be used, not misplaced or misused, but can be somewhat of a finger pointing. And while there's merit, because we do live in a world that was designed and created for people without disabilities, typically when you start pointing fingers, it puts up these defense mechanisms and can limit actual change and growth and curiosity from taking place. So all that being said, we're not here to shame, we're here to get curious, and we're here to explore a topic that may oftentimes have a lot of barriers or walls built up around it. The second thing is, because this is an area that holds some sensitivity and some emotional weight behind it, you may notice as you're watching this that no matter how gently or kindly I attempt to communicate the information, it may stir up some feelings of confusion or doubt in yourself. So I would just say, if you're starting to feel agitated, if you feel like there are things that are being stirred up for you, instead of jumping to either shut this video down, I don't want to watch this anymore, or I'm going to power through and just pretend that those feelings aren't there, instead of doing those two options, I'm going to recommend or suggest that you just briefly pause the video. That can be for however long you need it to be, but take a few minutes to just recenter yourself, whether that's some deep breaths, that's you walk around outside for a second, you pet your dog, whatever that may be, drink a glass of water, to just kind of come back into your body. You pay attention. This is where the curiosity piece comes into play. What are you feeling? Where might you be feeling that? And just acknowledge that it's there. Hey, I'm feeling stressed about this, or hey, this is making me feel really insecure, or this is making me feel like a crummy person. Whatever it may be, that you acknowledge that and then just say, okay, that's how I'm feeling, and then re-engage with the content when you're ready. And then lastly, all that being said, the goal of this video is to bring some awareness and understanding to a topic that can sometimes be used as a blanket statement. The reason that we feel like it's important to talk about is that it is an issue. It is something that's present in our society. And if you're a non-disabled human watching this content, then there's a good chance that there are some ableistic tendencies that are just woven into your own life because you're a non-disabled human who grew up in a world that was built for non-disabled humans. So that's kind of baseline before we jump in. Take a deep breath. Ground yourself. I care about you. This content is meant to help me grow and learn. It hopefully is helping you grow and learn. but it all is being communicated with an effort and a desire to see the way that our culture does things shift and change. So, what is ableism? You can Google that. You will get a bunch of different hits for what it is. So I'm going to give you, first of all, my definition for what I believe ableism to be. And then secondly, I'll give you a more internet broadly based definition, and you can compare the two. Our definition is: ableism is the belief or posture that humans without disabilities are superior, advantaged, and more capable than humans with disabilities, and there is an added air of celebration or rightness held in those beliefs. That is my definition. That is how I have experienced and seen mashed up into one. And when I get tired and my brain starts just mushing words together, which is something that you've maybe noticed if you have been following us for a little while. But this is how I have seen and experienced ableism. Again, this is coming from the perspective of a non-disabled human. The reason that I feel like I can and want to talk about this subject is this is a non-disabled human calling other non-disabled humans into action to evaluate our own stances and our own understanding of disability, and to look inward and to be willing to do the work of parsing out where we can be more accepting, where we can break down bias, where we can challenge ourselves and grow. That being said, I'm also going to give you a definition from Access Living, which describes ableism as the discrimination of and social prejudice against people with disabilities based on the belief that typical abilities are superior. At its heart, ableism is rooted in the assumption that disabled people require fixing and defines people by their disability. Like racism and sexism, ableism classifies entire groups of people as less than and includes harmful stereotypes, misconceptions, and generalizations of people with disabilities. That definition goes into a little bit more detail in depth. Mine is a little bit more consolidated. There are other definitions that exist outside of the two that I've just given you. So I would encourage you, if this content is interesting, to do some of your own research and to see where other gaps can be filled in. But I do think that between these two definitions, we get a good understanding and overview of how ableism shows up in our world. Why is this important? Where is it coming from? And what do we do about it? I was like, do I want to start at the top of why it's important? Also, I was like, is that the order? We're going to talk about first where it came from. We actually have a few other videos that I think would be really helpful for you in kind of completing this topic or process, which is that we talked about the moral, the medical, and the social models of disability. So if you haven't seen those videos, check them out. Each of them describes a different cultural stance towards disability, and there's different bias and understanding that's interlaced with each of them. The medical model tends to be more fix-it oriented. Disability is something to fix, that a non-disabled human is the status quo of humanity and the baseline and the goal that we're all trying to get to and achieve. So therefore, a disabled human, we should try to, through medication primarily, or treatments, get them to resemble a non-disabled human as much as possible. This is kind of a snapshot of each of those. The moral model of disability tends to tie in this idea that disability is a punishment, that there's a lot of spirituality and religious practices or traditions that have been infiltrated into the moral model over the years, that it's because a disabled person did something wrong in their life or their parents did something wrong in their life, and therefore they're being punished by this disability. And that's where you kind of see this inspirational model of disability tied into as well, that disability is something to overcome, that it's the plight that you've been given, and that in overcoming it, there's a certain level of celebration or inspiration that is achieved. All of that being said, the videos go into a lot more detail than what I'm giving you here, but our world that we live in, and this we can say about a lot of the isms, right? If you're talking about racism, if you're talking about sexism, if you're talking about ableism, goes back to a lot of systemic issues in a world and a society that's being created with a specific type of person in mind. And that specific type of person receives privileges and advantages that people who don't fit within that type receive. We've seen that throughout history and repeatedly with non-disabled humans versus disabled humans. So our world was not built to be accessible to disabled humans. For a lot of history, people with disabilities were pushed to the corners and isolated and tried to keep them out of the public eye or society as much as possible. That's obviously damaging for many, many reasons. And while our culture has moved, for the most part, beyond that extreme prejudice and discrimination against people with disabilities, there are still a lot of systemic issues, rights, privileges, etc., that are not being granted to people with disabilities. And this is part of the social model of disability. The social model of disability believes that, by and large, disability is a concept that is placed onto someone because the world has failed to be accessible or adaptive. That has kind of a wide range of implications. We're not going to go into all of them here today, but the idea there being that someone who's in a wheelchair, we say that there's a disability because they are unable to stand and walk on their legs. However, the issue of access is really more of a societal issue. Not having ramps, not having accessible doors, not having accessible parking, not having elevators, not having easy access to elevators. Those are kind of big things. There's also a lot of small things, like when we were first getting ready to open, there were a couple of students from UNCG who found out what I was doing and reached out, and they're like, we both have disabilities and we would love to basically come and audit your business and do a walkthrough and see how accessible it is. And I was like, that's amazing. Thank you for wanting to do that with me. And one of the students was in a wheelchair, and she came in, and there were so many things that she pointed out to me that I would never have thought of, because here's the ableism piece, I don't have to. And that's where privilege also ties in. My own privilege of being a non-disabled human, living in a world that was built for non-disabled humans. There are a lot of things that I just don't even have to think about, or that don't present themselves as obstacles or barriers for me. So one was our POS system. It's self-signing. Is it at a height where someone in a wheelchair can actually reach? Another one was the bathroom, the ability to actually open and close stalls. Is there a place for someone to put their bag if they're in a wheelchair? Is there room to navigate once you're inside of the bathroom? There were just a lot of things that weren't within my frame of reference, because again, it's easy to think of myself in my perspective, in my viewpoint, and what my needs are, because that's what I've had to do for most of my life. And so breaking against ableism requires recognizing that there are needs outside of your own, and what does it look like for those needs to be met with adequate access and accessibility, in addition to the line of thinking that someone without a disability is superior to or should be celebrated more than someone with a disability. Pause there for a second. How are we doing? How are we feeling? Do we need to take some deep breaths? You can take just a moment of silence and stillness if you need to. This is your reminder that if at any point in this video you need to pause and just take a break, please feel free to do that. Now that we've talked about some of where ableism is coming from, what are the origins, hopefully that makes sense why it's something that is prevalent and is something to contend with. Why is it so important to do that? I believe it's important because I believe that all humans should have rights because they are humans. That includes humans with disabilities. That's what we're fighting for within our business. That's what we are hoping these videos are part of. That's the coaching and the workshops that we're doing. That's all part of that work of shifting the narrative around disability employment and what it looks like for a person with a disability to truly belong and be seen and celebrated within our world. So it's important because humans are deserving of rights because they're humans. It's also important because there's a large percentage of our population that is disabled. And when we limit access, we're cutting off a large percentage of our population. Baseline, you're a human, you should have human rights regardless, period, the end. There really doesn't need to be anything on top of that. But if you want to add something on top of that, then I would say 25% of the US population has a disability. That's a large percentage. That cannot be ignored. That needs to be important. That needs to be a focus. I don't remember what my third point was. I've totally lost it at this point. What do we do about it? Maybe that tends to be where I like to go with things towards the end. So what can you do with this information that I'm giving you? Since I'm not giving it to you just for the sake of having the information hopefully turns into curiosity and then ultimately into transformation. Some things that you can do and practice would, one, to do a feelings check. Again, what does this topic bring up for you? What feelings does that elicit? From there, getting curious about why those feelings are present and what they might be attached to in you from different experiences or understandings that you've had in the past. So that takes quite a bit of internal work. But for some external work, I would say, one, if you have people in your life that you feel like are safe and that you want to have some of these conversations with, having someone to do some external processing with could be helpful. And then secondly, just being an observer and paying attention to moments where you recognize a predisposition towards someone without a disability, a bias towards someone with a disability. Where, do you notice accessibility when you're in spaces, when you're out in public? If so, what kind of accessibility do you see being offered? Kind of take the time to put yourself in some different perspectives and see what you notice. And then from there, I still encourage curiosity. Ask questions, get curious about why things are set up the way they are. What do we feel like is missing? And then as you're doing that work, you'll probably start to notice that pieces connect more and more. I know that has been true in my own life. The more that I've evaluated and gotten curious about my own internal process and my thoughts and my feelings about things, I have started to become faster at being able to identify where some of that bias is in me and seeing it more in the moment and I'm starting to be able to catch it and be like, oh, me saying this right now is bias. What am I really thinking or believing here? Is that truly what I think or believe? Or is that something that I've internalized from the world that I live in, from the society that I'm in, and I don't want to have any part of that? If it is me, then I need to dig in deep and examine that and see where and how I need to change and be willing to do the hard work of some of that unraveling. None of that's easy. We'll talk in some future videos about different instances or examples of ableism so that you have some other maybe hard factuals or examples to tie back to. But for now, just start paying attention to how this makes you feel. What do you notice in terms of access in the world around you? And how can you start having some conversations with other people in your life about what this looks like? So that being said, this is also an invitation for you to join in conversation with us and with our community. If you want to drop some questions or thoughts in the comments below, we would love to engage with you. Thank you for being here. Again, if you liked this video, if you want to dig in a little bit more to it, we would recommend that you check out one of these 3 videos, which is either the moral, the medical, or the social model of disability. That will help a lot in your journey around ableism, and we will see you next week. All right, Chez fam, your keyword for this week is monstera.